To those waiting with bated breath for that favorite media catchphrase, the U-turn, I have only one thing to say. U-turn if you want to. The ladies not for turning.
Welcome to the Fidelis Leadership Podcast, a place of learning for those who aspire to leadership excellence. Here's our host, Mike Etor.
Today we have Dr. Andrew Temte joining us. Andy is the former CEO of Kaplan Professional and is the author of Balancing Act, Teach, Coach, Mentor, Inspire, and The Balanced Business, Building Organizational Trust and Accountability Through Smooth Workflows. He hosts the Balancing Act podcast and the Saturday Morning Muse, and is also the lead singer of The Remainders, a rock act that just celebrated the release of their debut album. Andy focuses on leadership development, the intersection between continuous improvement and organizational health, closing the skills gap, and creating alternative pathways into the world of work. And Dr. Temte and I were connected by a mutual friend, and I have since, scoured him on social media, and I find him to be the real deal. And I'm thrilled that you're here, and can't wait for you to share some of your hard-won experience and insight. So thank you, Dr. Temte, and welcome to the Fidelis Leadership Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Mike. I'm really happy to be here today.
Oh, you're very welcome. Well, the intro was very brief. You've got a very rich background. Can you give us another minute or two? What more do we need to know about Dr. Andrew Temte?
So I'm kind of my doctorate is in finance from the University of Iowa. So I'm a University of Iowa Hawkeye at heart, finance professor by training, expected to go into academe, and found entrepreneurship instead. So my major professor, Carl Swazer, and I started a business called the Swazer Study Program for the Chartered Financial Analyst exams, which we grew from nothing to the world leader in the span of about 9 years in the 1990s. And then Kaplan came calling in late 1999 and wanted to buy our little business. And I spent 22 years at Kaplan in various roles. And I think the thing to punch from the intro that you don't know about me is that I also had some leadership positions within Kaplan on the higher education side. I led the College of Business and Technology for what is now Purdue Global, and was the interim president for a small college in New Hampshire. So I play both on the professional ed and higher ed side of the equation.
Yeah, thank you for that. I did see that when I researched you. You obviously held several very senior executive roles within Kaplan, and I was, I'm not taken aback, but I was intrigued by you also interim college president. So that had to be a very unique experience. But bottom line is you have a very rich business and leadership resume, and as you know, this podcast is all about people trying to maximize their leadership effectiveness along their journey. And so I am just thrilled you're here. I always ask a few standard questions up front, Andy. If someone met you and followed you on LinkedIn and said, "Oh my God, I follow you on LinkedIn. I'm about to go in a meeting. Can you give me your executive summary of your leadership philosophy?" What would you tell them?
Yeah, so I would just say very simple things like close your mouth, open your ears, and go to the Gemba. So in the world of continuous improvement, there's this thing called the Gemba, Gemba walks, Gemba boards. In Japanese, Gemba meaning the real place where, basically where the work happens. So get out of your office, go to the front lines, talk to the people who are actually doing the work, set your phone down, turn it off, open your ears, close your mouth, and listen to what's going on. That's basically the bottom line.
I love it. Great answer. And I want to ask you again up front. I believe from studying you, I know what you currently do in your current, professional capacity and all that. And I want to make sure we clarify that for the audience up front. So, who does your company help? What are your clientele, and what do you help them with?
Yeah, so I'm a leadership development thought leader today, spanning continuous improvement and organizational health. What I don't do is I have not hung out my shingle saying, "Please call me and let's have a paid mentorship session." I'm not there yet. What I am doing is I am teaching back at my local university. I'm in the management department. I've got 28 bright young individuals who are just entering their careers. I love helping them. And the combination of my two books plus my podcast, I really think of them as public goods that any prospective leader, manager, an individual contributor who wants to grow in an organization can climb on board my journey of personal and professional continuous improvement, because I'm 61. I'm not done learning and growing. So come along with me, and I'll help you get started on your journey, and you can help me stay relevant and viable and active as a business leader. I will have 2 courses coming out this spring in both strategic planning and continuous improvement toolkit based on my second book, but I'm not quite there yet.
And those would be courses available for the public, paid for courses?
Yeah, paid for courses, and also both a corporate version and academic versions spawning off of my my teaching experience.
Yeah, I love it. I also ask everybody on the show right up front the timeless question: leaders born or made?
Well, I think it's both. And the reason it's both is because we are all leaders of our own story. And so many people convince themselves that they are not a leader. And I argue against that, because yes, you may be an individual contributor in your work life, but there's some element of your life where you are the leader. It's either at home or in a social circle or in a philanthropic organization you might be a board member on. So we all have this leadership trait born into us, and it is the difference between great leaders and those that are not are have you really worked on nurturing your innate leadership capabilities. So it is you can be made as a leader. I like to think of myself as a made leader because of the mentors that I surrounded myself and the potential that they saw in me that I didn't see in myself at a particular time in my life. So you can get all wrapped around the axle of this narrative that I'm not a leader, and then all of a sudden, ta-da, you develop a relationship with somebody that starts pulling that out of you, and all of a sudden you're on a different journey.
Yeah, I love that answer, and I agree with it entirely. Well, one of the books that you've published is titled Balancing Act: Teach, Coach, Mentor, and Inspire. Love that title, by the way, and love those 4 those tasks. Could be verbs and nouns, I guess. So the bottom line is, why did you write the book, and what audience is it aimed at?
So the audience is easy. Again, it's prospective leaders, managers, existing leaders, managers, individuals who want to grow their personal agency and begin a journey of lifelong learning and continuous improvement. If your narrative is, no, I've learned enough and I'm happy with who I am right now and I don't want to learn and grow, it's probably not the book for you. But for everybody else, that's it. And the tagline, teach, coach, mentor, inspire, that is my personal purpose. That's why I was placed on this earth. That is why I'm here. I couldn't put words to that purpose until kind of in my late 40s. I wrote the book to give back. I wrote the book to help others not make some of the forced errors that I made throughout my career.
Yeah, I love that answer, and we are kindred spirits in that. I've also written a few leadership books, and I've done some things right, and I hope other people can learn from that, but I also hope they can learn from some of the classic boneheaded moves that I did throughout my career. And I will tell you that one thing you said about a person that, I'm good, I've learned enough, I don't want to learn. Boy, I tell you, I want to ask your thoughts on this, but I know philosophically we're aligned. I mean, there couldn't be. I'm trying to think of a worse statement someone in a leadership role could make. And I use myself as an example. I'm 68 years old and, 24 years in the Marine Corps, most of them in a leadership role, 15 years publicly traded C-level guy, and retired at 57. And now that I'm teaching and coaching, not a week goes by that I don't see something, read something, hear something. I'm like, how did I not know about this?
Right.
How, which tells me the journey's never over for a serious student of leadership. It's just never going to be over. Anyone that declares, I've got it mastered, I'd be hesitant to really put a lot of stock into that person entirely. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, to the individual who's telling themselves that they've got it all figured out, spoiler alert, you don't. and in the most inopportune time imaginable, that bias that you've created in your own mind that you've got it all figured out is going to come and kick you in the rear end in exactly the time that you don't want it or need it. It certainly happened to me. So, when the ego starts to take over, especially those with an underdeveloped ego, that's when we really get ourselves into trouble.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, back to the book. And I know it's a lengthy book and crammed full of stuff. I haven't read it yet, but I looked through it on Amazon and all that. I've seen some reviews. Sounds great. I've already ordered it. What are some of the most important, concepts, issues, or questions the book explores and addresses?
So the book is half autobiography, half business book. I tell life and leadership lessons through my own experiences, and right at the front of the book, I'm a boater, so we live right on the Mississippi River here, and I've owned small boats, big boats, and everything in between. And one of the main leadership lessons that I learned as a boater is that you are responsible for your own wake. And that applies in a leadership setting, because if you can imagine Mike or Andy traveling through the halls of the businesses that we've helped to lead, as we travel those halls and as we talk to people and as we have conversations, we leave a wake behind us. All we see as the leader is the path that we're cutting. We seldom look behind us at the ripple effects of our wake and the effects that that's having on individuals and on teams. So I encourage folks right at the beginning of the book to think about the impact that you're making on your organization. Even some of the smallest things that you might utter in a meeting can have lasting effects. I've had former team members come up to me and say, Andy, I remember what you said to me back in 2015, and it was so impactful. And to me, I can't remember that experience. Yeah. And to me, it was a passing moment. But to them, it was one of the most important things that happened to them in their career. So, I also, my wife is an equestrian. She does dressage, and that's a sport that is all about very fine movements and having the horse dance with, in concert with the human that's sitting on the horse. But the actions that the leader is taking on top of the horse are almost imperceptible. And this beautiful dance is happening as a result. And there's this concept in dressage called the half halt. And the half halt, again, is imperceptible to the individual who's viewing the ride. But to the rider, things might be starting to go off track, and bad stuff is going to happen. And so you just take a deep breath, you seat into the saddle, and just kind of, it's that movement of like taking just a moment of recentering and then continuing to move forward as if nothing has happened, but you've made that subtle correction. And I think that more leaders can do that, especially in the heat of battle of business, because we get ourselves all wound up and we're moving, and boy, taking that subtle half halt every now and then can help you. It can help your teams, get back on track. So those are just two examples of some of the metaphors and personal stories that I like to tell that turn directly into leadership lessons in the book.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. I've also seen in other articles and posts and podcast where you mention a concept called organizational entropy. And first of all, I'd like you to, because I'm not sure what it is really, I'd like you to identify what's the term mean? And I'm assuming that it's not good for an organization. And so if that assumption is correct, how do leaders identify it, avoid it, or eliminate it if it's present?
Yeah, so based on the second law of thermodynamics, it is the concept that over time and without intervention, everything falls apart. Our universe will dissipate down into nothingness or collapse back in on itself. But without intervention, everything dissipates and falls apart. And that's happening to your business every day. This, without intervention, without being on a true continuous improvement journey where you're trying to get just a little bit better tomorrow than you are today, mapping all of your value streams, ensuring that everybody knows where you're going, the direction that everybody needs to row. The status quo and doing things the way that we've always done them, that is a narrative that's also very easy to succumb to, because the status quo is easy. The continuing, we all like consistency. We all like, it's human nature that we like the status quo, and it's hard to continually reinvent. But the reason we have to do that is if we stand still, life will roll right over us. The outside world, for example, will just roll over our business if we're not thinking continuously about how to transform, the big transformations, and even the little changes that are going to keep us one step ahead. So that's the concept of organizational entropy, and the way that you combat that is by engaging in a continuous improvement plus organizational health journey that you take the entire company on.
I love it. Well, a follow-up question to that. What are some of the classic, I'm assuming there are classic symptoms, signs, indicators of this disease, so to speak. And are there any favorite, more effective techniques, questions that leaders can ask, or things to look at to diagnose the patient, so to speak?
Well, simple one is turnover, engagement. If your culture is all about the status quo, rinse and repeat, doing the same thing over and over again, your people are likely going to be saying that everything's cool, but they're not going to be necessarily fulfilled and truly engaged in the work that they're doing. Everybody's punching the clock and doing the same old, but you'll revert to mediocrity in your employee set, because the people that really want to move and shake and change the world and do great things, they're going to leave you. And the folks who like continuity and stasis, they're going to stay with you. So then over time, the business will stagnate, profits will stagnate and fall back, growth will stall, innovation will stall in the organization, new product ideas, etc. All of that will either stop or significantly slow down. And you can just wake up one day and go, oh my goodness, our competition is eating our lunch. What's going on? And all of a sudden you got a major transformation on your hands. Whereas if you were on a continuous improvement organizational health journey, where continuous improvement is super simple, Mike, it is having respect for people, both your customer and the people who work with you and for you. It is the identification and minimization of waste, and it is having a maniacal focus on the customer. A lot of people think that continuous improvement is hard to implement and it's going to make a huge change to the business, and I completely argue against that. It can if you allow it to, but continuous improvement journeys can be fairly simple. And there are, in my second book, I actually have a 10-item toolkit that folks can install in their business like right away and start to see results from.
Yeah. Well, one of your early comments in what you just said was, if you ask people, they'll tell you everything's fine. And I think what you're implying is, to get the good feedback from your people, you have to have established a culture of trust in which people are absolutely willing to speak truth to power. Easier said than done in my experience. I mean, as I'm sure you've seen, you've been around so long, everybody, open door policy, I really want to know, let me know. And they don't want that kind of truth sometimes. They want truth until it's like, well, you're telling me I'm not all that good, or that we're not all, whoa, I'm not prepared for all of the truth, So I'm obviously, making a joke about it, but how do leaders go about creating that culture of trust that produces a willingness by everybody to speak truth to power tactfully and professionally and appropriately. Any tips for people that want to do it but not sure they've done it, and they're not, or maybe they're sure they're not done it all that effectively?
Yeah, well, the place to start is with self, because if you are a leader with a weak ego, meaning you're easily offended, it's all about you, you are directive, it's my way or the highway, Andy said or Mike said, and you believe you're the smartest person in the room, then you've got some introspection and some work to do on yourself, because developing a culture of empowerment, engagement, and everybody bringing their superpower of their whole self into work means that you're going to have to be constructively vulnerable at times. You're going to have to admit that you were wrong, and then you're going to have to actively listen to what others have to say. Take that information on board and confront the biases that have calcified and built up over years, if not decades, of working in a particular way. So my advice is to work on self first before you start implementing fancy tools to get people to talk to you more and open up more. Because if you're not walking that walk, because you're asking your people to be courageous, creative, vulnerable, and you're in a position of power. They are not, and so it takes real courage to screw up the energy to say, yeah, something's wrong here. I'm going to raise my hand. And if you're the leader who's historically done the smackdown, then you're going to go absolutely nowhere with the journey to build a more open, honest, constructively vulnerable, creative, courageous organizational culture where you really can energize the people around you. So work on yourself first, because boy, if you do the smackdown one time with somebody, I view trust as a ladder, and you may have made all sorts of progress, but you smack somebody down, make them feel small for making a contribution, and right down to the bottom of the ladder. And steps back up are so hard to make.
Yes, I agree with that. And, as it takes a lot of time sometimes to build up goodwill with clients and customers. And it only takes one bad comment or uncaring or unfair comment toward them to where in some cases that relationship is destroyed forever.
Right.
And I view trust. I mean, trust is so important to me. I wrote a book called Trust-Based Leadership. It's, aside from character and integrity, the traits and qualities of leader. I mean, if you don't have a culture of trust, you're doomed to mediocrity at best, I feel. And I also am so appreciative of your comments on trust and that smackdown. And that doesn't mean, I know you're not implying, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're not implying that direct mentorship comments, evaluation of somebody's performance. That's your job as a leader. You can't stray from that, of the fear of offending somebody or whatever. I mean, sometimes that's why they're paying you the big bucks as a leader. You got to say, Come on in here, Susie, love you, but that could have been better. Talk me through it. Let's talk about this. What was your thought? Develop, mentor, and all that. I say that once a leader violates the trust between someone that trusts him 360 degrees, trusted, and people that he trusts, it's akin to the violation of a marriage, literally a marriage between a man and a woman. I mean, you know, all the therapists will tell you, marital infidelity, other kinds of trust, it can be overcome, but at best, you're putting back together a crystal vessel, and you can put it back together, but those cracks will always be there. It'll never return to that pristine vessel. And I feel that what you're saying and what I'm saying about the violation of trust is the same. You could get someone to trust you again, but boy, they'll never forget that one time when you just jumped down their throat unfairly or inappropriately. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm totally with you there. You can't be a pushover. This whole concept. When I talk to leaders about the concept of vulnerability and being courageous as a leader, it takes courage to be vulnerable. But you're not a pushover. You are constructively direct with your people. You're speaking the truth as you see it, but simultaneously, you've got open ears and an open mind that you might be the problem. Because one of the things I like to say is, if you're pointing a finger at somebody else, 3 more are pointing right back at you. So take that in, certainly take that into consideration. But yeah, you're not. A lot of people view this style of management, you're just a pushover. No, I can be a hard-charging, results-oriented leader for sure, but if that's all I am, and I'm super directive and it's my way or the highway, my people are not going to give me their best.
Yeah, I agree. Well, your rich background, shows literally that you have worked with, observed, and taught, mentored, developed a lot of leaders during your professional career. So you have a very rich data set, so to speak. So are there any, let's talk about this is a two-sided coin question. I'm going to ask you first, are there any traits, habits, and skills that the top slice of the very best leaders you've ever interacted with seem to have in common? And I follow that up with, well, let's talk about the charitably put less effective leaders, which could range from, mediocre to toxic. Do they also have traits, habits, and lack of skills that most of those kind of leaders on the bad side of the bell curve seem to have?
Yeah. So a component of the standard work of a leader and a manager that a lot of folks miss is that their primary job is to be a coach. And great coaches, they are able to create an environment of psychological safety within their teams and the individuals that they're coaching. So the very best leaders that I've seen, that I've interacted with, they can create this sense of psychological safety within within their business. They're patient. They listen. They take constructive feedback. They're not afraid to hold others accountable, especially those that they favor. Bad leaders will create an environment of psychological safety for a subset of team members, those that they favor, those that they like, shunning everyone else. So, a really great leader doesn't play favorites, and is a fantastic communicator and is able to create clarity within an organization. Bad managers, I like to I use the terminology accidental manager. Far too many managers in the world are accidental managers. I am one. I started out with a finance background, and over time I gained leadership. I was put into leadership positions, but only because I was a great individual contributor at doing a thing, and somebody said, "Hey, do you want to manage 8 people?" And I'm like, "Sure," but I had no idea what I was doing, and entering leadership and management as an accidental manager makes it much easier to say, yeah, I'm going to firefight instead of empower and put decision-making on the front lines. I'm going to be directive. I'm going to thrive on obfuscation. Hey, everything's great in here. It's all the problems are somebody else's fault. Those are all, I know I'm mixing the good and the bad here, but hopefully it's clear to your leaders which are bad and which are good traits and characteristics.
No, that was a great answer, and you brought up a lot of good points. And the thought occurred to me as you were talking, if you would crank it up a level. So you just talked about, traits, habits, skills, or lack thereof of the very best and the less effective leaders. How about executive teams? You've done so much at the executive level. And as you know, you could have an executive team loaded with individual talent, franchise players, every one of them.
Yep.
Yet it's not a, say, Super Bowl winning executive team, mediocre at best, sometimes inferior, a lack of results. So what do you see? What attributes, habits, practices have you found are common among the most effective leadership teams, executive level leadership teams?
Well, this may sound quaint, but they're all in it together. They are working toward common aims, a common vision. They share the organizational purpose, and most importantly, they speak. They don't necessarily speak the same language, but they're speaking the same language that is creating the clarity of who we are as a business, where we're going, what we do, what our cultural norms are. Because on the flip side is an environment where the senior leadership team gets together and there's a bunch of head nodding and yeah behind closed doors, maybe a few fights here and there, and everybody shakes hands and says they're going to go out and talk to their teams on a level playing field with the same message. But they go back to their teams and say, yeah, we're going to put out this vision statement that says X, but we're not going to do that. We're going to do something else. And some of the biggest interpersonal conflicts that can happen in an organization happen in the C-suite, because those same egos that we talked about before, they start colliding and everybody's jockeying for position. And that's when things really, really go off the rails.
Yeah, I thank you for that. I love your answer, and I want to get your thoughts on this. When I coach executive teams and write and all of that, I always say that my observation of executive teams and even my military experience is that the best leadership teams are those that can argue well. Mm-hmm. And people say, what do you mean argue well? You didn't argue in the military. Your colonel told you to do something. Oh, no, I don't know what your stereotypical view is, but nothing can be further than the truth. In the Marine Corps, people would be surprised at how much arguing goes on in the meeting.
Yeah.
Tactfully, professionally, there's rank involved. I'm a captain talking to a lieutenant colonel. That's a big deal in that environment. And you're pushing back hard. And the example I use is when there's a mission to be done, an enemy objective, a real mission in combat, that colonel usually has multiple units assigned to him and different specialties, helicopter-borne, mechanical, wheeled vehicles, armored vehicles, boats. And all those commanders want that mission. And so they are pitching their scheme of maneuver, how they would accomplish that mission to the colonel. And he's listening, and all right, Mike just briefed his mission, his plan. What do you think? And they're shooting holes in it. That's a pretty good plan, but what about that? It'll never work and all that. And then at some point, the colonel, the euphemism we use, slaps the table. We are arguing. And at some point, he, boom, slaps the table and says, okay, I have made my decision. We're going with option C, the mechanized company. Well, that means I'm disappointed, and 3 or 4 other commanders are disappointed. And this is what I mean about arguing well. We've all said our piece. We've done our best. Colonel made a decision. And when that door opens up from that meeting room, everybody is leaving smiling, and I'll tell you what, option C is the plan. That plan is everybody's plan, and we are taught I was taught this as an 18-year-old enlisted leader in the Marine Corps. One of the worst things you can do is go back to your people and say, you're not going to believe what he wants to do.
Right.
We're ordered to do this, but this is terrible. We're all going to get killed. You can't do that, Yep. And so the analogy, the applicability between the both environments is really the same. And, I wondered if I triggered any additional thoughts on you. The ability to argue well, I think, is very important. I think you agree with that. And related to some of the earlier questions, how do senior leaders ensure that they have cultivated a team that knows they are expected, not only tolerated, is arguing well, they are expected to argue it. Don't sit there if you know a product rollout is doomed. Don't sit there, speak, let's hear it. Yeah. So your thoughts?
Yeah, I love the tool of the uncomfortable pause. Because that folks have questions. You're in a strategy session and you're talking about a new product launch that's going to fundamentally change how the business operates, and it's going to touch every part of the business. And you're telling me that you're sitting out there as the chief marketing officer and you have no questions? Come on. I'm going to sit here, and this is the teacher in me, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to patiently wait. So what do we know about human beings? We like to talk. We abhor a vacuum. We abhor silence. And we're also, we abhor change, all of those things, and we don't like conflict. The vast majority of us just run from conflict. So we're talking, creating that team where folks are going to constructively engage and argue well, as you put it. That runs counter to most people's, what they're all about as human beings. So this takes practice, and it's something that you really do have to practice as an executive team. And the best way that I did it was the use of silence. Because folks abhor a vacuum, they do not like silence, and the questions will come if you wait long enough.
Yeah, I agree with that. And a related question on the same concept, maybe a different technique or an aligned technique, is most experienced leaders will agree with what you're saying. In fact, all of them will agree with what you're saying. And they've all learned as senior leaders, don't you tip your hand early. Don't go into a meeting and say, well, we're here for this. Joe's going to brief his plan for this brand rollout, and I just think it's a great plan. I've never seen blah, blah. Well, what you've just told your executive team is, well, the boss is already in love with it. Am I going to argue? You've already poisoned the well. So I love what you're saying about the uncomfortable pause, and how I was taught and how I teach it is, reserve your comments for last. Don't poison the well. Do a kind of healthy instigation, make people talk. And in my case, I would say 50% of the time, my preconceived notion going in that meeting was altered greatly by some of the conversation that happened that probably wouldn't happen if they realized the big guy already liked the plan. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, 100%. If you walk into a strategy session, and this is the organizational purpose statement that this is what I think it should be. You're not going to get the unvarnished feedback that you really need to make great decisions.
Yes, yes. Well, you've got so much experience now with Kaplan teaching, developing, mentoring, and all of that. There's a question I think that's going to be near and dear to your heart. I am so brought up, believe it or not, in the Marine Corps, they place so much emphasis on leadership development, role models, mentors, coaches. You are expected. I mean, as a young enlisted Marine, I'm 19 years old, but now I'm a corporal in charge of 12 other Marines. And believe it or not, I was expected to be their mentor, their role model, their developer. I was in high school 2 years earlier, and now I got these guys, but it's a relative thing. And it was like, if you're in charge of one other person, you are it for them. And the good news is, everybody is considered a leader and mentor, so you can look around, and it really was a great organization for that. We have our 10%. There are some bad leaders there, but generally speaking, everybody was focused on the mission, same doctrine, same everything, and you could find good leadership everywhere at every level, not necessarily the highest levels. It was really, it's super good. So my point is, what would you tell leaders on the importance of role models, mentors, coaches, with a follow-on caveat? I have found that a lot of leaders, young leaders, let's say under 35, they feel, that's for the old guys. You know what I mean? When I get older and I'm in the executive, that's when I'll get a mentor. That's when I'll get a coach. I'm like, no. I tell people, if you'd have run into a good mentor who wrote and studied when you were younger, you wouldn't need me when you're 53. You know what I mean? So your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I'm, as I mentioned before, I'm teaching at my undergraduate alma mater, and students are graduating and they're asking me questions about getting jobs. And, I put my resume out on Indeed and I'm not getting a whole lot. What's the matter? What am I doing wrong? And the first question I ask them is, who are you physically talking to? Have you nurtured a network through high school and through your collegiate years? You've got a family. The vast majority of you have families or some type of family network. Have you explored all of your mother's colleagues and sat down and talked to one of them about the world of work and what your passions are and what you want to do? And it's developing those networks early and keeping them active throughout your career and growing those networks. It all comes down to those personal relationships, the mentors, which I have a very specific definition of a mentor versus a coach. They're two different things to me. One is much stronger, much more lasting, and frankly much more personal than the other. Coach is more transactional, but you need both. You need guides and Sherpas at some times, and you need coaches at other times, and then you've got this core group of mentors, about as many as it can fit on a hand, maybe one more, but those are the folks that are going to really tell you like it is, and and developing those networks and those mentors early in one's career, that is one of the key ingredients to success, both early and late in your career, because you never know when something's going to come out of left field, throw you off balance, rock your world, however you want to think about it. And it is the network that's going to catch you. And if you don't have a network, you're going to fall pretty far and rely on yourself to catch yourself and pull you back up. And that's a lot harder than a world where you've nurtured these relationships over years and decades and really put in the effort. It doesn't happen miraculously, and that's what a lot of folks, well, it's work and I don't have the time. Make the time. Make the time to reach out. Call. Be courageous. One of the things I've learned from one of my mentors in the music world is a lot of us think that doors are closed to us and people aren't going to pick up the phone and they're not going to talk to us. Oh, that person's so high above me, they're not going to give me the time of day. And yes, sometimes that's true. Sometimes over 50% of the time that's true. But you'll be surprised how many people will pick up the phone, give you 5 minutes, give you 10 minutes, hell, give you an hour over coffee because somebody did that for them and they want to give back. So don't be afraid to pick up the phone. Don't be afraid to walk into somebody's office and start developing those relationships.
Yeah, I love it. I agree with it. And I'm not sure you've seen it or are familiar with it. There is a short video clip of Steve Jobs that's carved out from an interview who is agreeing with you and said, he told a story. He said, don't assume that the answer is going to be no, even from someone like me. And he said, when I was 15 years old, I looked in the phone book and I found the home address of Hewlett and Packard, I think it was Bill Packard. I found him.
Sure.
And I sent him a letter and said, my name is Steve Jobs. I'm interested in this. Would you happen to have any spare parts that I could have? He asked for something, and Packard answered him. Answered, and a box came, and thus developed a relationship. And Jobs said, I never forgot that. I said, years later, I'm like, Fortune 500 company, the guy's answering me. And then he hired him to be an intern at Hewlett Packard. Yep. And so the relationship was good and all of that. So I agree, and he agrees that, just ask. You have to do it tactfully and respectfully. They're busy people and all that. But my experience, and I'd love to hear yours, my experience is really good, accomplished people almost always love to give back. They love to give back. The venue's got to be right. The timing's got to be right. But I find that very, very few of them have reached where they are without role models, mentors, and coaches, people that took time out for them. And they are, I remember a case where I met a guy on this podcast. I forget who it was, but he said he happened to be on a flight and he got upgraded to first class, and he looked over, and I forget who it was, but it was the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And he, oh my God, I know who you are. And the guy was very good to him, was reading, and he put away his book and talked to him the whole flight.
Oh, awesome.
Gave him his business card, said, you get in touch with him. And it created a very, I think, a lifelong relationship between the two. And here's a very important guy. And I think this was a college kid or recent college graduate sitting next to a celebrity. And that guy took time. And so his message was, I benefited from it. I never forgot it. So if someone approaches you and you're the big guy in that seat, put your book away, take time. You never know the kind of impact you're going to have. Any thoughts on this?
Oh, Absolutely. And, this is where I am at this point in my life. I love my wife dearly. I love the property that we have, and I'm having just a great time not being in the rat race. But at exactly the same time, I pick up the phone. I love the podcast environment because I get to meet really cool people like you. We're hopefully reaching an audience that needs us and needs some of our messages. And the local coffee shop that I frequent, they know my tea order, English breakfast with a side of half and half, because that's where I love to go when folks call me and say, hey, do you have a half an hour that I can bounce this idea off of you? And I'm like, awesome. Let's meet at the Root Note at 9 a.m. and have some tea.
Well, I love it. And there's no doubt in my mind you've influenced many and you will continue to do so. Well, listen, our time is up, unfortunately, but I can't let you out of here without asking you the fantasy question I ask everybody. If you were able to bring back one leader from the past, spend a day with that person, who would you choose and why?
Well, I'd actually like to go into their time frame, not bring them here, because I would at least hypothetically be able to work in their time period better than they would be able to work in ours. We'd probably spend the whole day answering their questions about, oh my God, what is this thing? I know for audio listeners, I picked up my iPhone 15. Anyway, Eleanor Roosevelt is the individual that I would like to spend a day with, or even an hour with, preferably at some point in her time arc, and ask questions about women's rights, human rights, the work that she was doing in a time when that work was a lot harder than it is today.
Oh, yeah.
And the main question is, how do you remain energized? How do you persist? How do you continue to move forward, given, and my God, you're Eleanor Roosevelt and everybody on the planet knows you, but you get all this pushback. How do you persist in your message?
Yeah, that's a great, I love your first choice, and your second choice is awesome. I've read about her, and I know some on a casual level the work you're referring to. One example that I'm aware of, and I'm sure you're aware of, she was a champion of racial equality, and
right.
This is at a time when there wasn't a lot of that in this country back then, and she was insistent on women's rights as well, and she let it be known that she was going to attend a church service in a black church. And her advisor said, oh my God, please at least sit in the back. She didn't have it. She went there and sat in the front row, and then invited some of the black women to her church. And again, she was advised, well, we don't really allow, they got to sit in the back. And she said, basically said, I'm Eleanor Roosevelt, and they are sitting right up in the front row with me. So reserve that pew. And she made it happen. So talk about moral courage in her time. And from what I understand, she had a profound impact upon her husband as the president. He always said she was his closest confidant and sounding board. Yeah. And so talk about being an untitled influencer, so to speak. She was the embodiment of that. So wise choice. Well, listen, how do our listeners find out more about you? How do they engage with you? Where do they find your content, your podcast, your books?
Yeah, so I've got a website, AndrewTemte.com, AndrewTemte. There is no P in my last name. So you can find the Saturday Morning Muse, the Balancing Act podcast, descriptions of both of my books, which are available on Amazon. We also have a little fun, and my rock band, The Remainders, there's a link to that on my website as well. So yeah, that's where everybody can get in touch with me.
I love it. Well, I'm sure you're going to be hearing from some people, and I already suspect this podcast will be very popular. So, Dr. Temte, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time sharing your hard-won experience, insights, and advice for us. So I thank you, and I respectfully ask that you consider coming back and doing another one day.
Thank you, Mike. It'd be my pleasure.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe, rate, review, and recommend to your friends. Please visit our website at fidelisleadership.com and sign up for our leadership newsletter. Until next time, remember the words of the ancient Greek philosopher Pericles.
What you leave behind is not what is engraved in stone monuments, but is woven in the lives of others.